This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Today's episode of the Motor City Sports Rant is brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Listeners of this podcast can save 20% off the first year of an annual subscription by visiting theathletic.com/DSP. Recently, this week, they released an in-depth feature on Shane Green. It's a must-read. If you want to know a little bit more than the box score, go check out theathletic.com/DSP. Subscribe to a great Detroit sports website and save some money.
Detroit is the greatest! Straight up light you on fire for a Coney dog right now.
Takes, throws, end zone, Calvin, touchdown, Detroit Lions!
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Motor City Sports Rant on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Always gotta remind myself of where I actually am because, honestly, I'm very hungry, and my co-host over here, John the Doc Macaroon, looks like a gigantic burrito at the moment. I would love a gigantic burrito. If anybody would like to bring one to our Laurel Park studios, feel free to do so.
Jason, what up, man? Look, I'm always happy to start the week broadcasting with you. I just, it was funny that you and I shared that I interviewed Karan Higdon on the network. I feel like you could not have been any less interested than what I had told you. I thought that was very funny. But look.
Hey, I'm going to be honest. I did not listen.
Yep.
And I can put away my
Why?
I can put away my hatred for Michigan and say that
awesome job, buddy.
I'm sure that these players, they are good people in general. And I as I've said in the past, I've put my hatred for Braylon Edwards behind me when I actually got to work with them back at the sports station. It's the brand. I don't like the brand. But the players, I'm sure they're all pretty great. I'm sure there's some a-holes as well, but from what everything you said, and definitely give a listen to the podcast, Karan Higdon sounds like a great guy.
Exactly. If you haven't heard it, go check it out, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Not only the interview I did with Karan Higdon, I featured 19 others as well, where they come in and we do a sit-down for about an hour, and we get a little bit more information, more insight into what makes these individuals tick, athletes, media members, and things like that, dignitaries, former athletes, former NFL players.
Dignitaries? Do you mean like you interviewed the Prince Harry?
I'm trying, man. I'm trying to get bigger and bigger guests. Dignitaries meaning like longtime established sports directors, former program directors of major radio stations and things like that have sat across from me and have been willing to share.
Well, maybe
insights.
Next year we'll actually get some royalty in here.
Exactly. Well, I think in terms of Detroit sports podcasting, I am royalty, and I want the credit from you. And this is exactly where it goes to what I wanted to talk to you about to start the show. So last night, I was enjoying the weekend, really reflecting on what a great week it was, having not only Karan Higdon in the office, Adam Carolla, the #1 podcaster, included us in the mix in terms of his promotion of his Detroit show, and he did the Big Three, which is very awesome, and I was very happy that, again, his second appearance on our podcast, that it went great, and I was reflecting and having a good time, and I came across this kind of in-depth feature on anti-doping stuff from like 3 years ago from Al Jazeera on YouTube, so I started watching it, and peeking back and forth on Twitter and watching this doping special, and it was kind of common and very basic stuff about doping, and the stuff that you would think was in it was definitely in it in terms of the way people are utilizing it and stuff like that. And all of a sudden I came across this thread where a couple local writers in town were kind of just going back and forth pitying their jobs and talking about how in the course of their work they were not happy, or they felt like they wanted to say to everybody via their Twitter platforms that their love and interest in sports in general has gone down throughout their time of work and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there reading it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm sitting there going, I can't get enough of sports. I'm sitting here listening to sports radio, watching on the television stuff about doping from 3 years ago, DVRing sports talk radio. I can't get enough of it. And these guys are like wallowing and pitying their situation. I'm just like, man, I can't dial. And I tweeted them directly. I said, man, guys, how do we interject more passion into what you're doing? And I said to them, look, I'm trying to dial it back. I got so much. I want to interview this. I want to do this. I want to email this person. I'm trying to do 9 things at once with a network. And you guys are blessed to have the opportunity to just dial up any PR staff and go wherever you want. And you're talking about, well, just because you're not a fan of the team, your love of sports has gone down. And because of the fans on Twitter that chirp all the time, the negativity of sports talk radio has brought them down. And actually, one of them replied back and said, yeah, he kind of admitted that throughout time now, he's transitioned from sports talk radio to NPR, and he is old and crotchety. And I'm like, man, that's basically what permeates Twitter, is a lot of negativity and sports talk radio. But there is a completely different side, which is the games, the stories, the fun, the passion, the drive. Like, looking at it from our perspective, we've gotten the door slammed in our face so many times that anytime it's open, I'm like super excited, and I'm not going to stop that. Vito's like, when are we going to get to the point where if you get a credential, you just go and stop saying that you got it? I was like, probably never, because of the fact that when you get the door slammed in your face so many times, we cannot be that passive and not be excited that, hey, Motor City Comic Con was there. Got to go walk around, interview a bunch of different people, felt welcome and things like that. But the negativity that I felt, I was just like, So earlier on Monday, I got all preachy in that they replied, and I said, obviously, turn off NPR. If you want to listen to that, of course, you're going to be freaking sitting in your rocking chair all angry and miserable and upset. And then a bunch of people started replying, back and forth to it. And what typically happens is the other side, people that want to bring up problems, they're like, I cover college sports, and yeah, it's a cesspool and it sucks. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. We can focus on the things that are negative in life all the time. You can sit there and you can talk about, that all Detroit sports sucks and this is that and that and that. We do that a little bit, but we also do features. We get interviews. We try to have fun. We joke around, me, you, Adam, Vito. We clown around with each other. We make fun of each other. We try to advance everyone's cause. And I said, if you guys focus on all that, then you're going to be sitting there wallowing in your misery all the time. Let's focus on other stuff. Let's focus on the good stuff. And then what inevitably happens, people will say, well, are you going to negate sexual scandals in college? Are you going to negate coaches that take advantage of kids and leave this and leave that? And they started listing one by one every problem in college sports. And I said, okay, you can focus on that and focus on maybe advocating for change. Or you can say, look at this one example, Karan Higdon. He was in that same system, got a degree in 2 years, 10 months, and he's taken advantage of the opportunity that he had and got a degree in marketing from Michigan, is going to use that platform to get his name over, do the hard work, come in and do podcasts, do interviews. If he has a good senior season, he will take advantage of the college experience and move on. Why can't we talk about that as well? And then all the excuses come in. Well, that's just an outlier. That's not the norm. And there is a systematic abuse of college athletes and things like that. And I said, well, in that vein, if it's not easy, but if you want to get ahead, you just got to kind of focus, try your best, build relationships, go to school, stay out of trouble, and you'll have an opportunity to get ahead. So if you read my Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, you will see solution-based stuff and hopefulness and things like that. I gave the solutions to happiness. On the other side, the other guy comes back with, he writes to me, a lot of times, we keep, allow me to paraphrase Martin Luther King, asking people without boots to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. That's what's thrown back in my face. And I said, quickly, and a lot of times there are people actually handing out the boots, but don't get listened to, or they get debated with. And in essence, what I said was, I just spent a thread of solutions, how to get through an obviously tough system. Yes, college sports is a cesspool. I've acknowledged that. I haven't said it isn't. And all I've said was, being that there's stuff there, it's challenging. There are challenges, but you overcome it and you move forward. And if you want to just wallow in that, like these journalists, like people that are really negativistic in their thinking, then you're always going to be miserable. And I'm like, no, I'm positive. I'm a guy that's out there trying to make solutions and dealing with things and trying. Of course, we've failed a lot of times. We've said things, done things that I regret, or you make mistakes or you face hurdles, but you don't sit there and wallow in it and not have any passion and things like that. But the other side did not validate what I said. No acknowledgement of any solutions. No acknowledgement of success stories like Karan Higdon. They just wanted to throw, well, what about this challenge? Well, what about this challenge? Well, what about this? And what about that? And I said, yeah, it's all there. You can uncover and investigate troublesome things all across the world. But the secret to satisfaction really is not that hard, Jason. If you try and be hopeful, have faith, be positive, and have good perspective, you really can look at a bunch of, situations that are real shitty, and you can find the light and hope in anything. But I couldn't get through to the people that were messaging me, and I was like, wow, man. Wow. That was the start to my week.
So I see two issues here, and I'll deal with the obvious one with the Twitter followers and everybody bringing up all the negativity. And what I say to that is that those people are always going to be there. And
exactly,
they're always going to find something negative,
right?
And they do get on people when they do try to find the positive. Like last year, it was almost impossible to try and find or talk about anything Michigan State football or basketball related without having all the other stuff brought up. And why are you talking about this when this is happening? There's equal opportunity to discuss this stuff. You can talk about the success that Michigan State is having on the court, and you can also talk about what's going on outside and what all the issues are with what happened with Michigan State football with Donnie Corley and the other two guys there, which that actually has been resolved finally. And I mean, for better or for worse. But this season, coming off of an awful season, if you weren't talking about just Michigan State being down in the dumps, then you were always going to have these people who are just throwing that in your face. And it's at that point that it's our job to you have to get through that, because there's good and bad in sports, and it's our job to report both and to talk about both and to discuss it. That's what we're here for. I mean, what would be the point of us even being here if all we were going to do is just constantly be negative or slant one side or the other? It would be completely useless. The other problem, and this is a problem that I see in it, and I take a lot of offense to it, is these journalists who pity themselves and what they're doing.
So you're saying it too, right?
My problem with that is I can understand a little bit, because I will put myself in that situation, is that I was on a sports station and I was constantly looking at sports every single day and following everything, and it got ripped away from me. It got ripped away from me
like that.
And with what I've been doing in my life, with my family growing and needing to I can't pay attention to sports all the time, that, at that point, I do understand myself. I'm not going to follow every single day of the Tigers and, follow everything that they do. But if I'm given the opportunity and it's my job to actually do this and cover that, I would be grateful every single day.
Exactly.
To be, even if I'm covering the worst team in whatever league, I'm doing what I would love to do. And clearly, if you're upset about what you're doing,
do something else.
Do something else. You are what's wrong with sports media. You're doing the same old thing. You're not changing. And there lies the problem. Everything gets stagnant.
Yes.
And
like, literally, I was thinking when I was reading that, I'm like, we would die if we could just cover the Tigers one time, to get a credential or to get an email responded to or things like that. And so for you to say, well, yeah, when you know the underlying aspects of sports and things like that with, athletes trying to lie to you and things like that, that's fine. But there's another side of journalists who are getting feature articles, who are looking in depth, who are asking different questions. Look, if you want to ask Miguel Cabrera all the time about leaving Detroit, he's going to be crotchety with you. Maybe you just ask him about, hey, being part of a rebuild, or you ask a different style question, or you don't ask maybe the most pressing topic of the day. You get to know the guy a little bit differently. And that gives you the hope of like, okay, this is an interesting cat. And so for me, I've been blessed to have that psychological brain where, however anybody presents themselves to me, I'm asking questions that I want answered. And if it ever got to the point where it wasn't fun or I didn't want to do it, I would I'd stop doing it, and I wouldn't complain in that public forum. I'd be grateful. I think that's the key that I tell a lot of people is gratefulness is so huge. You got to be grateful every day you get to wake up. Like, I'm grateful to see you. I know that our call time is 1 o'clock. I knew that you were going to be late. I wasn't even here at 1 o'clock. I'll be honest with you. Got some coffee. I rolled up in here at 1:06.
Good stuff. Because I texted you. I told you I'm going to be late.
Well, I knew you were going to be late. It was like, okay, I always say 1 with the hopes, and, it's a little bit of a secret, but I know around 1:15 is really the time I want to get started. So I tell you 1 every week, and it's fun.
I know, and we didn't start till 1:30 because of you.
And so I took an extra 15 minutes to handle some DSP business. And so it's fun. And I think that's the key. And we'll wrap it up with that, as we don't want to get too preachy to start the week. But all we want to say is there is a side in life. And if you want to choose the side of being satisfied and being positive, I think it's a lot more fun than being negative. And I agree with you, too, with what you went through, in that it wasn't a situation where you were given any notice, you heard whispers, but all of a sudden, boom, the station flipped. And you were the guy sitting in the chair as it was happening. So you had the unique perspective. But do you hate sports or hate sports talk radio? No, you listen to the competition. You are invested. You do a podcast, and you continued with it. And that's the key, is that life happens, shit happens, you deal with it, you move forward, you be positive about it. So, but at least one of the writers acknowledged, I'm getting older and I'm being a little bit crotchety and, watching too much NPR and stuff like that. But I'm thankful now, being just about to be 40 years old. I got fired and I love it. I love the fact that I wake up every day and I'm like, okay, what's next for the podcast? Now we had a major interview. We have major guests. Now my thought is, what's next? What's the next thing to keep it going? And one of the things hopefully happens is a partnership that allows for a staff gathering where we all can have fun and everybody take advantage of a fun night and a fun time. So we're working through that and continuing to build relationships and continuing to promote everybody here. And look, all I can say is that if your perspective is sour, everything's going to be sour. And if it's not, then you might have a path of finding fulfillment and happiness and talking about sports. And I want to segue into this because I do think a lot of people are turning off sports radio and looking elsewhere and looking for more positive type stuff, because how many days in a row can you run with Detroit sports is terrible? Literally we stopped. We did it like maybe 4 times, 5 times.
Yep.
That's about it. We don't talk about that anymore. We talk about now, look. And for those that talk about the Tigers, our perspective would be, look, they played a game over the weekend where they had a 2-0 lead. We're looking just at that one game. A bad decision was made by the closer, maybe a bad decision made by the manager in terms of putting that said closer in again. And we talk about that particular loss, and it's fun to talk about. And so I asked, and it was a good question, like I always ask, how do you feel about the Tigers' loss to Seattle? Got a handful of responses, and some were like, who cares? But for us that love sports, that love the competition and talking about it, I could talk to you about any one aspect of any game because that's the fun part about it. But do you feel like just your assessment of how we've done this show has been that we've been fair and having fun with it, or are we too negative, being that you're a host of the show? I feel like we balance it out and we talk both about the negative and the positive, but I think some people now are really hypersensitive to some criticism at all and are just kind of tuning out any podcasts, sports radio that bring up negativity.
I can see where people might construe. I can only really speak for myself in that I know people can see me as being negative towards some of the sports. I know for Lions, I don't see how people could see me negative. I feel like I'm one of the biggest supporters of the Lions. Even though I will tell it like it is, I have the most hope for the Lions every single year. And you can attest to that because what do I always say? I say, come week 1, they're 0-0. Anything can happen. I think my biggest thing is with the Tigers and it's honestly, it's nothing. It's not about being negative. It's about what I see. Maybe that is the problem, is that with the sports world in Detroit right now, with the teams that we have, it's kind of hard to really slant it towards being positive. I tell it like it is, and I will try to find the hope in these teams. But, it is hard to see.
Big picture-wise, I can see what you're saying. But here's something that gives me hope, and when I focus on it, you got a pitcher like Liriano. Al Avila has been criticized regarding the moves that he's made, right? I think he hit on one. I think he got Liriano cheap, and there's an opportunity, if he can get 4 or 5 more good starts, to flip him, and now more pieces can come in as long as he continues to pitch well. And that's the key. And that's the part that I look at is, okay, you know what? In the end, the moves that he made last year, 50% were questionable. I think the haul that you got for JD Martinez, just based on the contract situation, he was pressed up against the wall. But the moves that he made for his son and Justin Wilson have paid off in spades, and people are like, oh, there's an opportunity to look at. There's a chance that some of the talent that was brought in that can be utilized and are going to be sent to the minors might be, worthwhile to look at. And so I think that that's something to look into and things like that. But I agree with you 100% in that. In anything that we explore, there's going to be some criticism, there's going to be some positivity and hope, and I think we are fair and balanced, and that's the only way you can do it. You can't avoid criticism because a lot of the teams right now are bad.
Yeah,
it's really rough.
You look at the Tigers, I feel, they're on the rebound right now because with the firing of Osmus, we finally moved past that. We started the rebuild, and even though it isn't going necessarily the way we want it right now, it's on that track that they have started the rebuild. You look at now the Pistons and the Red Wings. The Pistons, they blew it up. They let go of SVG, and it's going to be a brand new era. And we're going to actually start. I think we can finally be more positive because with all these sports teams, we were on the last rungs of, there was a high point at the start, and it obviously didn't work out. So yeah, there was definitely going to be more negative. We weren't going to talk about how SVG could make it work in Pistons in Detroit. We were going to talk about should he be gone and what do we need to do to get back to where they need to be. The same thing with the Red Wings. And we can still debate whether the whole Ken Holland and Jeff Blashill is the right move, but we also found the possibilities there with if the Lightning were to somehow win the Stanley Cup Finals in the next 2 years, maybe Steve Yzerman's coming to Detroit. So that's our job, is to find those silver linings.
Exactly. And just look situationally with the Tigers. They're in Minnesota now. They're facing a team that's kind of similar to them, and they're battling it out for second place. You got Ron Gardenhire returning back as a manager to the place where he spent a significant portion of his managerial career. So there's stuff to look into. And within game, we can talk about strategy. We can talk about, why did you put in Shane Green in that Sunday game? Why has he been utilized in so many situations? And people message us discussing, high leverage situations and maybe utilizing Jimenez. There was debate that was sparked regarding who's the closer. So there's a lot to get into if you have that passion. If you go with the notion of, oh, this is all terrible, then why even talk about it? Just we could be like, okay, fire up the microphones. Well, the Tigers suck, Pistons suck. There's a lot going on. I mean, look, with the Pistons, what gets me fired up is a little bit now the rumors of Becky Hammon coming in have kind of escalated a little bit. So now there's a little bit of a dynamic there of, is it Becky Hammon? Is it Dwayne Casey? Is it a retread? Is it just somebody that we've never heard of? Or somebody that's been a coach before that hasn't been coaching in a long time, like a Mark Jackson?
Why would either of those guys come here?
Mark Jackson could come here.
No, Mark Jackson I get. Why would Dwayne Casey or Becky Hammon come here?
Well, Becky Hammon, obviously, it would set history, and she'd have the opportunity to coach a men's she'd have an opportunity to coach in a professional National Basketball Association.
We're getting off topic. But anyways, she is
right. And I think in that vein, I think your thinking is the same as mine, which is just sit on the bench and wait for Pop to retire and coach there.
Well,
just sit there.
Wait
just
for a better opportunity.
Just wait for the opportunity and just say, Pop, you've shown me love. I will sit on this bench for 2 more years. When you're done, I want the job. Name me the successor. I think if she advocates for herself, then that should be the job she takes. But if the Pistons come calling, she should take it. Of course she should. If she does a good job, more people now are rational and blame the owners. That the owners are terrible. That Tom Gores is not doing a good job. I think that if she came here and won maybe 45 games, she'd do a good job.
I would be more concerned. I'd be concerned for her to be coming into such a bad situation that sometimes coaches only get one opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes too.
And this is nothing about her. I think she's going to be a coach in the NBA.
Right.
And I think everybody should get a shot, or at least in these situations, she deserves the shot. I just think for her, I'm not sure if the Pistons is the right place. You're coming who do you got? Reggie Jackson, Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond.
I'll see. It's good. It's good debatable stuff. And I think that's why you and I do this podcast. There's so much we can throw out there and then start giving opinions on, and it makes it fun. I think that's why you've come in here 155 straight weeks and talked about it. You're not bored by it, and you come in and you have a lot of good things to say. And I just hope that all I can say is to wrap up before we take our first break. Second half of the podcast, we'll get more topic driven. We'll talk quickly about the Tigers and Lions, but I just hope for you that in your career, in anything that you do, that you get up and find a purpose, whether it be you're fully passionate about it or not, that you don't get to that level where you just feel like, you wake up and you feel like that there's no purpose, or that you lose that passion. Because if you lose it, it's tough, because then it starts showing up on Twitter and your attitude would be changed. And I haven't seen it yet, so I'm thankful. Despite some challenges that you have faced, you found silver linings, and you've also fought to do more stuff. And that's why you're part of this team. I like guys like that fight, that don't just go, oh, well, my station flipped, so I quit radio and just, that's it, I'm done, and I'll never do nothing again. No, you fight, you battle, you stick with it, you do something different. You gain experience in other ways, and now you're the king of hip-hop in Detroit. And it's awesome. That's what I'm saying, You made grand decisions that, made news. So it's all good. And that's the way I look at it with Detroit sports. And that's why people will say, well, why are you guys doing a podcast? And what makes you guys different than anybody else? I think what the stir is that what the secret recipe is that we're a group of crazy guys that love sports so much that we want to spend time talking about it and breaking it down on that level. And that's what makes it fun. And that's all I can impart for the preachy portion of this year's podcast. I don't think we'll be doing it too often. But as a psychologist, that's what I want to interject. And I hope that's what comes across if I do an interview or through these microphones, is that I'm a sick guy that loves sports, and that's what it is that the outlet for me is psychology and sports, and I get to fulfill both ends of it, and I'm lucky for that. And I hope that everybody listening figures it out, that if they're not happy, to do something different, or to re-spark the same interest that they've developed before, because if we didn't do this podcast, I would generally miss it. I would. And it wouldn't be as fun looking at Detroit sports if I didn't know, oh, man, I get to talk about the Tigers and their blown game. And, oh, man, they could have won 3 or 4 versus Seattle, but they didn't. And if I didn't have that chance, it would really suck.
Yeah, I can say better than you.
All right, let's take our first time out. We'll come back, quickly get your assessment on what you thought about this week with the Detroit Tigers, and definitely talk about the Detroit Lions. You're listening to the best sports podcast network in Detroit, the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Jason, I want to tell you about our host site, Podomatic.com. We've recorded about 950 weekly podcasts, and we've only used one host site. There's only been one place we've uploaded all of our recorded audio, Podomatic.com. If you're looking to start a brand new project, Jason, Adam, Vito, Steve, Jerry, all the hosts here on the network, we're going to recommend Podomatic because it's super easy to use, quality links, everybody can listen to it, everybody can find it. That's how we've grown, gotten great guests to come on our podcast, and that's why we have the following that we do. So if you want to get a leg up on the competition, we recommend Podomatic.com.
Motor City Sports Rant, Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
You brought some logic to the table,
I thought this song was, it fit what that first half of the podcast was.
Exactly. Good stuff. That's why you are the best hip-hop producer in the 313, baby. What's up?
Yeah, it's, I heard this song, I was just going through Spotify, just kind of listening to, it on shuffle, and it came up, like a week or so ago, and I was just like, this song, it says something, and it's simple. I work hard every mother day.
Exactly. That's the whole purpose of what we're trying to do here. So to talk about Detroit sports, everybody is kind of looking at the Detroit Tigers and what they did. They kind of have kept people's attentions, but they had a bad weekend in Seattle. It was not good. 2 games in which they had a strong opportunity to win. Friday with Michael Fulmer, and then Sunday having a 2-0 lead. Friday, they got out to a 4-0 lead, and then Fulmer went out there, had a rough start of it, I think at the start of the 6th or 7th inning, and he gave up runs, and the Tigers lost Friday and Sunday. They could have won 3 of the 4 games, but they didn't, and I think they're about 20-26 right now, but they're still firmly in second place because the division's not that good.
I mean, isn't this what we're kind of hoping for, that they lose some games? Because it's such a... I'm so conflicted on the Detroit Tigers right now that... when they win, it sucks because it hurts the whole rebuild process. And when they lose, it's my team. I'm so conflicted. I need help. John. I need help on what to do with this team, because I'm honestly torn between liking if they win or hating them if they win, and give me some direction. I need some help from the doc.
No problem. I definitely am here to help everybody out that's confused as to what to think with the Detroit Tigers. I think it's real simple. You must view it this way. Obviously, big picture-wise, it's a rebuild. So the expectation should be zero. Your expectation should be just peek into a contest, see who's performing well, who's developing at what level according to what their standards are. And so what should happen is, yes, game to game, there are some factors in game that should make you highly upset in terms of if Shane Green leaves a hanger and gives up a 2-run home run and he doesn't do the job, you should be upset. But in terms of why you should be upset, not because he cost them the championship. No, he cost them Sunday's game. And that's why you should be upset, is that Sunday they had an opportunity to win that game, and he was up an account he had a 2-strike count. So the next pitch should not have been a hanging slider. The pitch should have been at least 3 feet off the plate with the hopes maybe of a guy that swings at a bad pitch. So you look at it, and at that point, you're passionate about the fact that why the hell is McCann calling a slider? And even if it comes from the dugout, you should have changed the pitch, and Shane Green should have executed the pitch better, or it should have been a situation in which, okay, you give up the 2 runs, you come back and you fight and you get the run and win the game. You don't lose 3 or 4 in Seattle.
So your advice to me is to take this game by game and not look at this as a whole, but to go game by game. When I get a chance to peek in on the Tigers, just enjoy it as it is.
You got it. Enjoy it as it is, as I'm enjoying this delicious coffee.
Now, what about the players? Because I think there are some players with all the injuries we've been having, guys like Nico Goodrum and John Hicks, that they've definitely stepped up, and not sure what they're necessarily going to develop into, but I feel the way that these Tigers are going, that if they do progress and they get better, they're more than likely not going to be on the team.
Exactly. And so you look at it and you go, okay, Nico Goodrum, if he performs, maybe you can send him away and get some pieces. So you look at each individual performance and you say, okay, you know what? What do the Tigers think about him? What do other scouts think about him? What are the opportunities? What are their roles? And there's a lot of information out there in terms of who's going to fit what role. And the biggest question that everybody has is, what role does Michael Fulmer play? And he struggled of late. He's given up runs. He hasn't been able to close the deal, has been probably the biggest issue that we've seen with him, is that he goes out there, gives you 4 or 5 good quality innings, and then he's blown up. And he's given up runs and walked people and let leads slip away. In terms of his last couple contests and what he's provided the team, he's done well, but not in terms of the level that we need him to help win games. And so it happens. It's the up and downs of Major League Baseball. You're going to have some stretches where, things don't go exactly right. You're going to walk people. You're going to make mistakes. And even Ron Gardenhire admits that he made a mistake in that Fires had a situation in a game over the weekend versus Seattle in which he was, around 90 pitches, and that's kind of his limit. They get to the dugout in between innings, and, the manager talks to him, and Mike Fires says, I got it. I'm going to go out there. I want to continue. And Gardenhire knew, his baseball instincts knew, this guy's done. This is his limit. And what does he do? He goes out there 4 straight pitches. The next, to start the inning, gives up a walk in 4 straight pitches. And Ron Gardenhire said, I walked up there and basically swore at him and said, you MFer. I knew it. He knew it. He was wrong. But he let the player dictate. And that's what I like about Ron Gardenhire, is that he's asked about it. He's forthright. He's honest. He made a mistake. He should have trusted his gut. And that's what you look at. You say, you know what? Ron Gardenhire, in terms of what's different between him and Brad Ausmus, is that the players know that's the guy in charge, and he's got a lot of respect. I think we should give the Tigers credit for winning 20 games at this point in time.
Oh, yeah,
they're 20,
totally.
26. It's not a big deal in that, most people would have thought after 46 games, they would have been like 10 and 36. So they've won a bunch of games. They've blown a bunch of games. And so with that, it tells you that we can continue to be interested and watch game to game and look at the evolution. And with guys like Nico Goodrum and John Hicks, the next stretch of games you want to see in terms of, are they a flash in the pan, or are they worthwhile pieces to a team? And the reason why it's fun with baseball is you can look at it from a short-term perspective and get excited like we did when Jacoby Jones was doing well, or you can take a longer view and you can go back and forth and explore them as a total player. 2 players that I talk about with Vito and other people a lot are Buck Farmer and Jacoby Jones. A lot of people look at short-term numbers with Buck Farmer and what specific role he can fill, and then you broaden it out to his career stats, and his career stats are not that good. But if you look at a certain 2-week window of what he's done in certain situations versus certain teams, he can get guys out. And then you get articles that say, oh, Buck Farmer, he can do some things. He's getting better. He's relied upon. Oh, then we put him in a game versus Seattle, and he gives up a single, a walk, and a single, and boom, he's off the field. So that's what makes it fun, is that we can peek into situations short-term or long-term, and that's the same thing that applies to Jacoby Jones, is that this is a cat that got hot, drove in a lot of runs, was a guy that was hustling. But now, in the recent stretch, in the last 7 days, you look at it and you go, ooh, some of the wrinkles and some of the problems that he brings to the table have shown up at strikeouts, and his offensive inconsistency have shown up. So that's the tough part in evaluating the Tigers, is that Al Avila's got a super tough job to decide, okay, what view do I take? Do I trust this guy to get better? Or do I say this is what he is and move on from it? So that's the stuff I'm looking at, is what is the process of the evaluation and what do these guys bring to the table? And it's been fun to look. It's been fun to do. And Vito's even surprised. He's like, dude, you're still locked into the Tigers? I'm like, Vito, if you ask me about anything Detroit sports related, I'm interested. To varying degrees, I'm interested. And I could talk about anything. And he has definitely been surprised at my level of ability to hang with him in terms of Detroit sports. Sometimes on some shows, I carry it more than he does.
I can't wait to see what Al Avila can do with this team. And I imagine at that time, whenever those trades happen, I'm excited to evaluate all that stuff.
Good deal. And are you going to any games anytime soon?
Not on the. Don't have anything on the docket, but I'm assuming sometime in the summer we'll hit the ballpark, take the kid, take it into his second game. Hopefully, it's not super sunny like it was last time.
Gotcha. And then to switch gears, to finish the podcast, you and I are definitely invested. Organized team activities have started for the Detroit Lions. They're gathering. We're starting to see what these guys look like together as a unit. Ragnow, Jared Davis is excited. We're going to get a chance to see what these guys are starting to do and implement. And the news broke earlier on Monday. The NFL has investigated the Lions, and they've determined that, hey, Matt Patricia did not mislead them. So now this story is day by day, probably until any new piece of information is released, is going to be put in the rearview mirror. And the Detroit Lions are going to continue to move forward day by day in a pivotal first year for Matt Patricia, and that's where they are. I'm excited because of the fact that I think you and I can say it. Now, this provides us a chance for the ultimate letdown, but unfortunately, who wears the mantle as the team that has the most hope now? Who wears the crown besides the college teams, besides Michigan State hoops and Michigan football and things like that? Who wears the crown in terms of having the mantle, as a lot of people are going to be watching them and hoping for big-time success? It's the Detroit Lions.
It's always been the Lions. I mean, even when the Tigers were as good as they were, it was always the Lions. The hope was always there.
Yeah, the hope is always there, but now it's also being met with some realistic expectation. It's being met. You could always have hope as a fan, and some people say, well, you're crazy. But now when you have a general manager from a respected organization, the head coach from a respected organization, and you got the elite quarterback that you think is your guy,
Matt Castle.
Yeah. You got the guys. You got Jake Rudock. You got the ability to go out there and put some good stuff on the field and good film. I think a lot of people actually now believe more, and that's why there's a chance for an ultimate letdown. And what is going to keep people watching is this team could be 10-6, or they could be 4-12. That's the range of what can happen with one injury or one mistake, or the team does not gravitate toward his system right away. It could be a disastrous first season, and so I'm leaning toward being definitely invested in the Lions and what they're doing, but I'm ultimately scared of the ultimate letdown.
Now, I know with OTA starting, I have a player who I'm going to be looking at in this entire offseason, what they're going to do. Is there a player that you see? Because for me, I'd have to pick at least on offense and defense. Defense, I'd go with Miles Killebrew, and offense, I'm going to say Luke Wilson, actually. Starting with Killebrew, I think he had a great rookie season 2 years ago and kind of fell off the face of the earth last year, when Tavon Wilson took over the starting role. And even after he went down, didn't take the starting role after that. They gave it to Quandre Diggs. So the question is that he's actually going to be fighting for a job this offseason. And I think, he had a lot of promise coming into this lineup, and if he can actually become what people thought he was going to be, that's just going to be so much better for this Lions defense. And then on the offensive side, I saw an article saying, can Luke Wilson be the next Detroit Lions Eric Ebron? And I'm just confused. I'm like, why would we want Luke Wilson to be Eric Ebron? Because Eric Ebron was hot garbage here. I want Luke Wilson to be better than Eric Ebron. I want Luke Wilson to be our Jimmy Graham, to be our Travis Kelce.
Well, in the spirit of fairness, if you read the article in depthly, there are some things when you look at Wilson's production in terms of his drop rate, it was a little bit worse than Ebron's. And so that's why people are like, well, is this guy actually an upgrade? I would think that tight end Roberts probably also has a chance to emerge to be the guy. But I think what the writer did was introduce the notion of here are the cons of Luke Wilson.
You can look at the cons. I can give you all the pros too.
What are the pros?
Look at Seattle and the type of offense that he was in. When he first started out there in Seattle, it was more of a run-based offense, and Russell Wilson hadn't really come into his own. And then by the time Marshawn Lynch is gone, and Russell Wilson started to emerge more as a passer than more of a dual threat quarterback, he had Jimmy Graham. They brought in him, and he was the main guy. And then Doug Baldwin emerged as one of the top wide receivers in the league. So Luke Wilson kind of took it on the back burner. So he didn't have all those opportunities to really showcase what he could do. I'm not going to sit here and say that Luke Wilson's the second coming of Rob Gronkowski or Tony Gonzalez, but I think that he has all the ability to come in and be a big part of this offense, because that role that was expected of Eric Ebron never got filled. And I think Luke Wilson has all those abilities to be able to do that.
Okay, so you're looking at the positive side, and you think with that offense, with an improved running game, he has a chance for success. That's all that's all the article did, was kind of introduce, hey, there's a chance for any player, for anybody that we look at, for their potential to be good. But when you play for the Detroit Lions, for some reason, there's a cloud of negativity, maybe a curse that some podcasters tried to lift that could be over them. And this year, though, with the fact that Vito and I helped lift the curse, there's going to be more of the productive side of things. And that's what's going to happen. We're going to hope for Luke Wilson to do well. We're going to hope for Kerryon Johnson to come in and handle his business. All right, Jason, with that said, I've enjoyed the time this episode. It went by so fast. Always enjoy turning on the microphones, having a solid sports conversation with you. Now, next week is Memorial Day. Obviously, I will be sitting back. Jason will not come to the studio. I will not come. A rare day off, and it'll be fun. Maybe we'll record something later this week and put it up Tuesday. Or if not, we will see you again on the Motor City Sports Rant in 2 weeks. For Jason Jarvie, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Definitely go check out our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. You can follow Jason on Twitter at Jarvie the King. Thank you again. We wouldn't have had the best week that we've ever had last week if it wasn't for your continued support. Free and easy way to support us. Visit our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Again, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Free and easy way to support the network. Until we talk again, thank you so much. This has been the Motor City Sports Rant.
Okay, nice, idiot. You. Bye-bye.
Toodaloo, motherfucker.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.
Loser.